Hello and welcome to Unacademy IAS, a one-stop destination for all the English medium civil services aspirants. Welcome to another session of Economy this week, wherein we take up important economy-related articles from different newspapers such as Business Line, Mint, Business Standard, etc., and analyze these particular articles. In today's session, these are the articles that I've taken up from different newspapers, and I'll be covering the time period from 4th to 10th September 2025. Let's begin the discussion, but before that, two very important announcements. If you're somebody who is aiming to ace the upcoming civil services examination, ensure that you have a proper coverage of the static portion, you have the right coverage of the current affairs, you have the right reading material, and you have multiple prelims as well as mains test series for you to practice. Once you enroll into our courses, all of this will be made available to you at the lowest price of 17,999. But I've been told that today is the last day to enroll at this particular price, and starting tomorrow, the prices would be hiked. In addition to this, if you use the code IAS English, by using this particular code, you can also avail an extension of up to 12 months free of cost. Those who are interested, do check out the details by clicking on the link provided in the description below. Second, very important announcement, I keep on getting mails as well as the comments in the video as to where you will get the access to the PPT as well as the notes of the articles that I'm covering in the session. All you need to do is go to the description part of this particular video. You will see a particular link, that is right in the description. You will see this link, Indian Economy for Exams repository link. Click on this particular link. A new window will pop up. Go to the prelims tab. You will see all the articles that I've discussed from the first episode of Economy this week. You'll also get the access to the YouTube video link along with one more link. By clicking on that, you will get access to the repository, that is the Google Drive, where the PPT as well as the notes of the articles that I'm covering in all these sessions will be accessible to you. Download these, but more importantly, use it for revision purpose. Now, let me start the discussion. The first article I want to take up for discussion is the Hire Act. Hire, first and foremost, basically stands for, right, the bill that has been introduced by USA Senator. The senator who comes from Ohio, right? This is a Republican senator by the name of Bernie Moreno. Now, what is this basically the hire bill talking about? The hire bill basically means halting international relocation of employment act. Halting international relocation of employment act. Now, what is the bill proposing? Please listen to me very carefully now. The bill basically proposes that the USA companies which are importing the services from different countries should be taxed. I repeat, the bill proposes that the USA companies which are importing the services, for example, what kind of services are they talking about? Any service for which a premium fees is paid, royalty is paid, service charges or other payments are made, and these particular services are exported from other country, for example India to USA, and the company in USA will import it and will pay certain amount of money. In either of these particular forms, the money that is paid by the USA companies should be imposed with an excise duty of 25%. This is what has been proposed in this particular bill. Now, in addition to these particular taxes, there are other taxes as well. There will be local taxes, etc. According to one estimate, if all of these particular taxes will get added, the overall tax liability on these particular companies will come to the extent of 60%. That's a very, very high number, by the way. And we will understand the implications in some time. The second very important point in this particular bill is the bill proposes that whatever money that is collected by imposing 25% tax will be, right, pooled into a particular fund, and this particular fund will be used, or the money from the fund will be used to provide upskilling or the training to the USA workers. These are the two very important provisions from the higher bill. As of now, this is simply a bill. It has been introduced in the US Congress. Now, once it is passed, will be sent to the president, and once the president will sign the bill, it will come into force. Let's understand the implications of the bill. What are the implications? First and foremost, this bill proposes to impose taxes on the services imported into USA. Now, what is the connection of this to India here? India exports huge amount of goods and services to USA. That's a fact, and you should know this by now. But when you look at the service exports, essentially majority of these particular service exports, right, basically let's say in the form of the software services, etc., land into USA market. Now, if you take the IT companies in India, right, for example, TCS, Infosys, Wipro, etc., these kind of the IT companies, if you take the total revenue that these IT companies have generated, more than 60% of these IT companies' revenues are generated from the USA market. These generate the revenue from the USA market, which means the first collateral will be these particular IT companies. What might happen, again, I'm saying what might happen is that the USA companies, one, rather than exporting the service, rather than right basically putting forward the requirement of the services to Indian companies, might start looking inwards now. Or second, they will keep on demanding the services from the Indian companies, but now they will want basically the terms and conditions regarding the charges of the services to be reworked, so that whatever taxes are imposed on the American companies, these will be absorbed or these will be negated by reworking of the charges for the Indian companies' services provided to the American companies, which might again mean two things for the Indian companies. Either the revenues generated by the Indian companies will become lower now because they will have to bear the burden of these particular charges, or else the salaries that are paid to the Indian workers might be reworked, or some of the Indian workers might even be laid off. This is one concerning, right? Let's say the outcome that is expected from the passage as well as the implementation of the bill. Now, apart from this, what is the other very important implication here? If the USA companies start to look inwards, will they find sufficient labor that is qualified? Understand this. Will they get good amount of labor that is qualified? One of the reasons why the USA companies look outward, especially into a country such as India, in order to get the access to this kind of a labor is the fact that sufficient quality labor which is required by these American companies is not available. So now will they be able to get the access to this kind of quality labor? That's doubtful. But more importantly, just think of this. Apart from getting access to, let's say, this kind of a quality labor, will the American companies be able to get the cheaper labor? What do you mean by cheaper labor here? It is essentially referring to the cost of the labor. Yes, no doubt, American companies generally do not find the quality labor that is required for them in the American market. That's a reason they outsource it. But apart from that, one more very important reason, the predominant reason why American companies look at India for the supply of these kind of services is they will be able to get the work done at a much lower cost compared to whatever cost they will incur in case they hire American. Right? So what would happen to the American companies in that case? Will they end up losing the cost advantage which they have built up over a period of time thanks to the globalization measures? So these are certain very important implications associated with the higher bill that has been proposed by the Ohio senator in the USA Congress. So these are certain very important points. Please make a note of that. And maybe this is one of the reason why now the trade negotiations between India and USA are back on the table. Yesterday, in one of the truth statements, the president of USA has basically stated that the negotiations between India and USA would be restarted. We will have to wait and see what kind of benefits or what kind of concessions the Indian side will demand and get from the American side in the context of all of these particular deliberations. So, based on this, here is an MCQ that I've provided. Please try it. And if you want to try it, hit the pause button, solve the question, then listen to the solution. Otherwise, don't hit the pause button. I'll discuss the question. Consider the following statement. The moratorium on customs duties on the electronic transmission has been in place since the setting up of WTO. I'll tell you what is this point. The higher bill proposes to increase outsourcing of services from USA. It will generate revenue for the imposing country. That is, the higher bill will generate revenue for the imposing country. The moratorium on customs duties on the electronic transmission has been in place since the setting up of WTO. What is this? Under WTO, there is a concept of moratorium on customs duties on electronic transmission. This has come into force from the year 1998. Under this, these kind of electronic transmission, that is, let's say service exports that are done from one country to another country, etc., these do not attract the customs duties. And that is basically the moratorium that is being mentioned here. But this has come into force from 1998. It was discussed in the 13th World Trade Organization Ministerial Conference. Now, in 2026, when the 14th Ministerial Conference will be taken up or will be held, it will be up for again renewal or the approval. But please remember, this has not come into force from the establishment or the date of establishment of WTO. No, because the WTO was established in 1995. This has come into force from 1990. First one is incorrect. The higher bill proposes to increase outsourcing of the services from USA. No, it doesn't promote outsourcing. Absolutely no. Third one, the higher bill will generate revenue for the imposing country. Of course, yes. The objective is to generate revenues. That is, the government of USA will impose 25% tax, collect the money. So it will be part of the revenues generated by the government. Okay, but of course, please remember how the funds shall be utilized, how this money shall be utilized, that is also being proposed under the higher bill. Right? So the right option for the question will be option A. But before I go forward to the next article, please do not panic looking at the provisions of the higher bill right now. Reason being, it has to go through the houses in the USA legislature first. It has to go through the houses and then go to the president. It is expected that when it is being discussed in the houses itself, the various technological companies or various tech companies which are very, very strong, which have got strong lobbying power in USA, will try to kill the bill in the house itself, will try to insert certain influence through the local representatives where they have given lot of funding for elections, etc., try to water down the bill, get certain exemptions, or ensure that the bill will be killed on the floor of the house itself. So please don't worry, but this is one aspect that you need to understand. Next article, Niti Aayog outlines roadmap to cut pulse imports. Now, if you look at the idea of a pulse imports in India, it's not anything new. It's nothing new in India. We have been importing lot of pulses. But what is let's say baffling, what is surprising is simply if you look at the total land used in the global market, the total cultivable land, if you see how much of this particular land is used for pulses, and out of that, how much of the land is used in India, you will realize that around 38% of the cropping area used for the pulse cultivation is used in India. I hope you understand this particular point. That is, imagine globally around 100 hectares of the land is the cropping area for pulses. Out of that, 38% is there in India. And not just this, 28% of the global production of pulses is done in India. But having said so, look at this. A large chunk of land, large chunk of production in the global market, largest producer of pulses. And then India imports pulses. India keeps on importing pulses. It has been one of the cause of concern. And when you look at the other side, that is total agriculture trade that India does with the rest of the world, India imports pulses, India exports other agriculture commodities such as cereals. So, high quality or high value agriculture we are importing, comparatively lesser value agriculture commodity we are exporting. So, there is always a concern associated with this. And that is the precise reason the government of India has kept a target of becoming self reliant in pulse production. Right now, that is for the year 24 and 25. For the year 24 and 25, the total quantity of pulses that was produced in India was somewhere around 25 million tons. The government of India by 2047 wants to more than double the production. That is, they want to increase it to around 51 million tons. I'm rounding off the number, decimals are there, don't worry. We want to more than double the pulse production. And by 2030 itself, the government says we want to make India self reliant, Atmanirbhar. We want to cut down the import of pulses and ensure the total production by 2030 will be somewhere around 34 million tons. But having said so, please understand there are certain concerns associated with the pulses in India. That is a concern associated with the pulse production. What are the concerns? Listen to me carefully. The pulse production is not uniformly spread throughout India. And rather than saying uniformly spread throughout or not uniformly spread throughout, there are around 10 states in India. There are around 10 states in India which account for more than 90% of the total pulse production. Repeat, there are around 10 states in India which account for more than 90% of the pulse production. And this particular production within the state also is not uniformly spread. Around 50 to 60 districts account for majority of the pulses produced in India. And that is one concern. Second concern is essentially the government of India simply says the gap between supply and demand is increasing. It is higher because in case of India, it's not that the pulse production has remained, right, let's say stagnant in the last 2 decades. No, the production has been increasing. But the concern is the demand at the same point of time also has been increasing. So as a result of this, the gap between supply and demand is also very high in India. And that's the reason Niti Aayog simply says if the government of India wants to bring down the gap between supply and demand by 2047, that is 100 years of independence, the production of pulses in India should be we should be increasing at twice the pace. That is whatever we are producing right now, we should be producing twice the amount of that in order to ensure that what is the demand by 2047 will be met without having to rely on the import. But why should we promote pulse production? Is this the only reason? Just because there is a supply and demand mismatch should we promote? Right, apart from that there are other reasons as in case of India. Please remember there is a large chunk of consumers that is specifically vegetarian consumers, and because we have a large chunk of vegetarian consumers, one of the most favored source of protein consumption for them will be through pulses. Is the point clear to all of you? Right, we have a large chunk of vegetarian consumers, that is vegetarian meal eaters. The favored source of protein consumption for them will be through pulses only. In addition to this particular reason, there is also one more very important ecological reason, environmental reason why we should promote the pulse production in India. That is, the pulses production will lead to fixing of nitrogen. It will lead to fixing of nitrogen rather than cultivating the same crop, right? Let's say the cereal again and again. Rather than that, go for mixed cropping, go for crop rotation where pulses will be cultivated. That will help in protecting the fertility of the soil. So these are some of the reasons why we must promote the cultivation of pulses. Now, what are the recommendations which have been provided by Niti Aayog? What are the recommendations? There is a full range of recommendations, basically spanning from the cultivation stage or harvesting, sorry, the seed stage to the consumption stage. Full supply chain recommendations, right? At various stages, the recommendations basically have been provided covering all the stages in the supply chain structure here. For example, the Niti Aayog recommends that better quality seeds must be made available. Better quality seeds. There are certain regions where certain kind of seeds can be cultivated, right? So these kind of seeds with better productivity, focused on one region, etc., the seeds must be made available for the farmers, right? The government should also go for procurement, procurement from the farmers at their doorstep. Go for the procurement. And in terms of cultivation only, there is a huge amount of fallow land. There is a huge amount of fallow land where the farmers, right, are not cultivating a crop because they are simply leaving this particular land, so that the fertility of the soil is revived, moisture in the soil is revived. So in the northern part of India, there is a huge chunk of the fallow land which is generally used for the cultivation of cereals. Why don't you use this kind of a fallow land itself? And divert a third of this particular fallow land for the cultivation of pulses. Use the pulses in, right, let's say distribution schemes, that is welfare programs. Use these kind of pulses. So have a look at this. These are some of the recommendations which have been provided by the Niti Aayog, right? Basically promoting the production, supply, as well as the consumption. And in terms of supply also, I hope you understand, I've not mentioned it, but please understand, there is a lot of wastage in the, right, let's say post harvest stage. There is a recommendation to reduce the post harvest wastages as well, right? So host of recommendations have been provided by Niti Aayog in order to promote the production as well as the consumption of pulses, so that the import dependence will go down. Now let me go forward. Let's solve the MCQ associated with the discussion that we have done so far. Consider the following statements. India accounts for 28% of global area under cultivation and production for pulses. The statement is incorrect. Why? 38% of the area, 28% of the production. All the pulses cultivated in India are covered under MSP, minimum support price. Underline the term all the pulses. It is also incorrect. There are certain pulses. For example, tur, urad, masoor, etc. These are the kind of pulses which are covered under the MSP policy. At the same point of time, there are also pulses such as Rajma, Bengal gram, etc. These are not covered under the MSP. So first one, second one, both of them are incorrect. Right option, right, is option D, none of the above statements. Next article, India, Israel sign a pact to further boost trade and investment. Now listen to me very carefully. Right now, India exports as well as imports from Israel. According to the latest figures, last year India exported more than $2 billion, imported around $1.5 billion worth of trade, or conducted this much amount of trade with Israel. But beyond this, the amount of investment that has been done by Israel, our total investment, bilateral investment, is around $800 million. This is basically point number one. What I've done is given you a factual information regarding trade and investment between India and Israel. But what is this BIT? Bilateral Investment Treaty. Now listen to me carefully. Let's say there are two countries, India and USA, United States of America. There are multiple companies in India which wish to invest in the USA market. And there are multiple companies in the USA which wish to invest in the Indian market. This is very common, by the way, very common phenomenon. But I hope you understand this. What are the legalities in India? What are the conditions in India? What are the provisions under different laws in India? Will be different compared to the American laws, American provisions, etc. So now there has to be an agreement, and this is basically BIT. There is an agreement between India and USA. Again, this is an example I'm telling you. There is an agreement between India and USA, and this particular agreement will basically have terms and conditions which are applicable to the foreign company investing in India and Indian company investing in America. How Indian companies would be treated in America, the terms and conditions will be mentioned in the BIT. How American companies would be treated in India, the terms and conditions will be mentioned in the bilateral investment treaty. What is the importance of this particular treaty? When these treaties are signed bilaterally like this, it will provide certain guarantees for the foreign companies when they operate in another country. They will provide certainty. For example, there are WTO principles such as a most favored nation, fair treatment, etc. Right? When there is a dispute between, let's say, an American company and Indian government, how the dispute would be resolved, all of these will be mentioned in the bilateral investment treaty. So the first bilateral treaty or bilateral investment, right, a proposal or BIT proposal was prepared in India. In India, I'm talking about in 1993. And based on this particular framework, we will call this as a BIT framework. Based on this particular framework, in 1994, India signed the first BIT with UK, or Britain for that matter. Later, the government of India realized there are multiple issues with this kind of a BIT framework. Right? For example, Kane energy issue, Vodafone issue, etc. In multiple cases, right, the government of India was on the losing side. And that is the precise reason the earlier BIT framework was withdrawn by the government. The BIT agreements were withdrawn by the government. And back in the year 2016, the government of India introduced a new framework, right? So BIT framework, the new framework was introduced by government of India back in the year 2016. Now apply all of that information, the agreement that has been signed between India as well as Israel. This particular agreement is going to promote the investments between both of these particular countries, because whenever BITs are signed, one of the important principles is of reciprocity. What benefit I provide to, let's say, the Israeli companies in India, I also expect Israeli government to provide the benefits to Indian companies. Treatment should be fair. Treatment should be right. Treatment should be on the national treatment principle, etc., etc. So these are certain important points associated with India-Israel bilateral investment treaty. Now, based on this particular discussion, please have a look at the MCQ here. Consider the following statements regarding BITs. These are agreements for the reciprocal promotion and the protection of investments in each other's territories. Of course, yes. Second one, India's first BIT was made in 1993 and it signed its first BIT with UK in 1994. Yes, both the statements are true. Right option for this particular question will be option C, both. Next, higher fees draw non-banks to set up white label ATMs. Listen to me carefully. Whenever you talk about ATMs, generally you'll come across two types of ATMs. Technical concept here. One is called as a white label ATM, and the second one is called as brown label ATM. What is essentially the concept of white label and the brown label? Let me explain, and you please remember all of this. The Reserve Bank of India says that NBFCs, non banking financial companies, can provide the services of white label ATM, but they will have to take a license from the RBI first to provide the services of white label. Now, what do you mean by white label here? There is an ATM installed, money will be filled, etc. Now, this ATM will be operated, I repeat, the ATM will be operated by the NBFC. Is everybody able to understand? The ATM would be operated by the NBFC. That is essentially, let's take an example here. In case of India, right? For example, Findi is one entity that is licensed by RBI to operate white label. There is also one more company by the name of Wakrangi. There are in fact five entities which have been given the license, but don't worry, these are examples. So these entities will have an ATM machine, will fill the money in the ATM machine. You can use the ATM machine, by the way. And right, basically the services, for example, withdrawal, right, you can do using this ATM machine. But why is this referred as a white label? Whenever you go to any ATM machine, you will see the bank's logo being displayed. But in these white label machines, the bank's logo are not displayed because there is no concept of a bank operating this ATM machine or managing this ATM machine. It is being done by another entity altogether. So white label ATM machines, they will give you similar services. For example, traditionally the white label ATM machines will give you services such as balance inquiry, withdrawal of the money, etc. But traditional white label ATMs generally do not provide the services of accepting deposits. Whereas if you go to, right, let's say a ATM that is attached to, let's say, an SBI bank, you will see there will be a machine from where you can get the money as well as the deposit money. Right. So basically, that is the idea of a white label ATM machine. Come to the term brown label ATM machine. In case of the brown label ATM machines, essentially the bank will contract the services to another entity. Right? The bank will outsource the work. The entity or a third party will have to set up an ATM machine. The bank will fill the money and the services, right, will be provided. And there will be, right, let's say certain amount of charges that will be paid by the bank. Right. So this is basically the concept of a brown label ATM as well as a white label ATM. Now, what is the connection to the article that is provided here? Very recently, the Reserve Bank of India as well as the NPCI, both of them have hiked interchange fees. Very recently, this announcement has been done. Both of them have come together and increased the interchange fees. That is, whenever you use other ATM to conduct a financial transaction or a non-financial transaction, certain charges would be collected by this ATM service provider. In case of a financial, right, a transaction, the interchange fees have been increased from 17 rupees to 19 rupees per transaction. Non-financial transaction, the service charges also have been increased. So the argument is very simple. With these kind of right, and before I go forward, some of you will basically assume that for even non-financial, it is the 17 to 19. No, this is for financial. This is for financial. For non-financial, it has been increased from 6 rupees to 7 rupees per transaction. Right. So with this particular hike now, it is expected that the white label ATM service providers, right, they will be more interested because per financial transaction or non-financial transaction, they can get more of interchange fees now. And basically, it is also required because in the last couple of years, the growth of the ATM machine coverage has slowed down. We want to have more and more coverage through ATM machines. And that is the connection of all of this to the article that is provided. Now, please solve this particular MCQ. Consider the following statements regarding white label and brown label ATMs. Both of these ATMs will have the logo of sponsoring bank. In case of white label, it will not be there. In brown label, yes. So first one, in both cases, there is a need for a separate license from RBI. Incorrect. Why? In case of white label, yes, it is required. In brown label, the bank is simply contracting out certain services. These ATMs were recommended by the Urjit Patel Committee to promote financial inclusion. No, this is incorrect. White label ATMs were introduced by Reserve Bank of India back in 2012. Urjit Patel Committee comes later, which is more associated with monetary policy framework. Right. So all the three statements are incorrect. Right option for the question will be option D, none of the above. Now, two more articles, just factual information. One is associated with agriculture credit. The article basically says that the government of India has increased the flow of agriculture credit. But the accessibility to agriculture credit is not spread uniformly throughout India or even proportionate to the amount of land that is there under cultivation. What do I mean by that? Please have a look at the data here. The five southern states account for 48%, 48% of the total agriculture credit. But how much is the total amount of land they account which is under cultivation? These particular states account for 17% of the gross cropped area. And we can see this kind of a mismatch or disparity in other regions as well. North India, it accounts for 20% of the area that is there under cultivation, but accounts for around 15% of the total agriculture. East part of India, it accounts for 12% of the area that is under cultivation, but only 8% of the credit is accessible there. Central part of India, 28% of the cropped area, but accounts for 14% of the total agriculture. And the western part of India, 17% of the gross cropped area and accounts for 14% of the total agriculture. What is the inference that you need to draw from this kind of a data set? The inference that you need to draw is simple. The agriculture credit, no doubt, has increased, but the accessibility is not uniform throughout India, not even proportional compared to the land under cultivation. So we need to ensure through various agencies, through various other reforms, etc., that there is a more accessibility to agriculture credit, especially the institutional credit for the farmers, or let's say the cultivation that is done, which is in much larger quantity compared to the accessibility to the credit. So this is just a factual information. Please make a note of that. Now, one more article, right, important addition to whatever you have studied earlier. The government of India has right basically approved. The cabinet has approved 1500 crore scheme for critical mineral recycling. Now, listen to me carefully. Earlier, government of India announced a policy by the name of NCMM, National Critical Mineral Mission. Right, under this critical mineral mission, the government of India has multiple objectives. One of the main objectives is to basically right put multiple blocks of critical minerals, right, where the mining can be done, where the critical minerals can be accessed and the processing can be done, etc. And it is expecting huge amount of investment not only from the private sector, it is also investing. The investment expected are to the extent of more than 34,000 crore rupees. Now, under the NCMM component itself, there is one more component that has been announced by the cabinet or approved by the cabinet recently. One way to address the availability of critical minerals in the domestic market is produce more, supply more. Another one is production is lagging behind the demand, import this from the rest of the world. Third one important now is to basically recycle from the used material. Recycle. There are a lot of right areas where the recycling can be applied. Again, I'm talking about critical minerals here. So the various projects, either the upgradation of the existing projects or the new projects that will be announced by multiple companies will be covered, and the financial assistance will be provided by the government. And what is the use of such kind of, let's say, projects? we will be able to recycle from various secondary sources, recycle the critical minerals in order to ensure there is a sufficient supply in the domestic market rather than importing everything or most of the requirement from the external market. So for that, government of India has allocated 1500 crore rupees. Right. So these are certain very, very important points associated with, right, let's say the critical mineral recycling project that has been approved by the government. Right. So these are the various articles as well as the concepts as well as the questions associated with the articles. If you like this initiative, do not forget to hit the like button. If you are yet to join our YouTube channel, kindly do it right now. Thank you. Have a great day.